Welcome, folks, to our Facebook Live on the UCP's 2022-2023 budget. I am David Shepherd, MLA for Edmonton City Centre, official opposition critic for health. Joining me tonight, we have our finance critic, Shannon Phillips, and, of course, our leader, Rachel Notley. So before I start tonight, I just want to acknowledge that we are meeting here tonight on the traditional territory of Treaty 6 and also recognize the Métis people who share a deep connection with this land. And I want to thank everyone that's joining us tonight on Facebook Live and on YouTube. So fantastic. We're happy to have you here. And I really want to thank Majesty and Friends, this fantastic business here in my riding of Edmonton City Centre, here in my constituency. Fantastic business that's run by owner Julie, manager Colleen. Thank you to them for having us here tonight, and we may get a chance to chat with one of them a little later on tonight. So tonight's conversation, as I said, is about Budget 2022. And we want to hear from you. That's why we're doing this live. That's why we've got this set up here. So in the comments, please drop your questions, your observations, your thoughts. We want to hear what you think about the UCP's most recent budget. So drop your questions in the comment bar. And please also like, share, let your friends, your family know. We'd love to get as many Albertans as we can involved in the conversation here tonight. You know, we know the last few years have been really challenging for Albertans. Even more recently, we have seen the fourth and fifth waves of COVID-19. We're seeing ongoing hardship in what we know is a tough economy. We're seeing rising costs on everything from car insurance to your utility bills to tuition and so many other things for Albertans. Electricity and natural gas prices have nearly doubled. And for a lot of Albertans, I think things are simply becoming unaffordable. And lately, because of the steep rise in the inflation rate, our cost of living just keeps going up. Lately, even just picking up your groceries, those bare essentials, the basics, is more expensive. We see it at the grocery store. I know you do too. So we know that Albertans need help. They deserve a government that's focused on making life more affordable for them, for all of us. And Jason Kenney and the UCP had that opportunity in Budget 2022 with record resource revenues to take some real tangible steps to make life more affordable for Alberta families and to make some key investments into our public services, our public institutions like healthcare, post-secondary education. But in what we've seen in this budget today, they haven't done anything to help. Isn't that right, Shannon?
Well, thank you, David. And as we all know, our economy is tied to the price of oil. All Albertans are used to this, and we're used to some of that oil price roller coaster. Right now, oil is trading at prices we haven't seen for 8 or more years. But something's different this time. Usually when the price of oil goes up, we see it translate into better jobs, into higher incomes. But this time, instead of building and hiring, most of the large oil companies are passing this money directly along to their shareholders, spending a lot of that money outside of Alberta. So meeting with Alberta families and small business owners over the last few weeks in consultations for this budget, people aren't feeling the prosperity of the previous booms, not at all. And the truth is many people and many businesses are falling further and further behind. It's been a tough couple of years, and it just seems to be getting tougher. So inflation, we know, is driving the cost of pretty well everything, but we didn't see anything to help folks out in this budget. Now, we fully understand that the UCP doesn't control the cost of bacon or tomatoes, but they do control the cost of tuition, of your car insurance. They can cap your electricity bill. They can keep your personal income tax and your property taxes under control. They've done none of that. What's worse, this budget is an absolute snooze button of a document. There's no plan for job creation in this thing. There's a bunch of words about strategies to make a plan for a meeting, but that is it. We are not seeing any real focus on diversification. There's no help for small businesses in this budget. There's only the end of some of the programs that have actually helped people even just a little bit through the pandemic. They're just disappearing. So school fees are going up. Believe it or not, they're doubling park registration fees because that's the priority. Camping will be more expensive. And they've continued doing this sneaky little tax grab on your personal income tax. So as we go along, usually your personal income taxes move along with inflation so that you're not paying more over time. But under Jason Kenney, you are paying more over time. And now you're paying hundreds of dollars a year more in Alberta personal income taxes than you were in 2019. So that's just a few of the things that I was really surprised that we didn't see any change on. And Rachel's going to talk a little bit more about what she saw in the budget and share a bit more information with you about what this budget actually contains.
Well, thank you so much, Shannon, for those comments. It was a really great summary, and David as well, for a lot of the things that we were really quite disappointed to see. But before I get any further into just discussing the budget, I would like to offer as well my voice to that of many, many political leaders across the province, the country, and the world in condemning the unprovoked attacks on Ukraine launched by the Russian Federation and by Russian President Vladimir Putin. You know, what we're witnessing on the world stage is simply wrong, and it's horrific. And in times of crisis, what I know is that we really do have to stand together, and what I can say is I'm pretty sure that all Albertans stand with the people of Ukraine. And we're also very aware that there's a lot of folks in Alberta with strong relationships to the people of Ukraine, and we want to offer our heartfelt declaration of solidarity for the worry that you're feeling right now. And we are going to try to do everything that we can to encourage all the people in positions of decision making to do whatever we can to bring this conflict to an end. So back to the budget. You know, this really is a budget that's, you know, it's very high on oil prices and very low on pretty much everything that might support Alberta families. You know, Jason Kenney and Travis Taves, the minister, and the UCP as a whole, they may be back in black, but what we know is that regular families are not. And that there's pretty much nothing in this budget that is designed to support those regular families who are increasingly overwhelmed by the costs that they face each and every month. So we've got sky-high oil royalties, but no stability in our health care. Sky-high oil royalties, and we're still almost 1,000 teachers behind where we were when we left government in 2019, where we've got sky-high royalty rates, but we are still looking for a meaningful plan to actually diversify our economy and create jobs that are long-term and sustainable in different sectors. And you know, the key thing is that we've got all these royalties, and we are not seeing any efforts to relieve families with respect to the over-the-top utility rates that they've been confronted with over the last few months. So, in fact, as you know, Shannon said, with the failure to re-index the income tax brackets, regular families are paying more in taxes, personal income tax every year. So this year, it costs your average family about $400 more a year. A seniors couple is spending about, as well, they're not indexing other income support programs. So a seniors couple is spending about $250 more a year. And then on top of that, if you're on AISH, one of the most vulnerable Albertans in the province, well, you are essentially paying $1,000 more a year. And I can't imagine anything as unfair and cruel as to make those with the least, who have some of the most biggest vulnerabilities, have to pay the most. So I was, as I said, also very surprised by the fact that this government really didn't do anything to invest more in healthcare. You know, what we see is a healthcare budget that when you look at real dollars, and that means taking into account inflation and population growth, we're still $100 million behind where we were in 2019. And call me crazy, I think we can all understand and agree that the healthcare system has had massive pressures on it, unlike anything we could have imagined in 2019. The other way of looking at it is just basically comparing it to how much money was spent on healthcare last year. And if you do that, well, we're about $830 million behind. That's how much they've taken out. So this is not a government that is at all interested in really reinvesting in our public health care to make it stronger and more resilient, more capable of dealing with potential further waves of COVID, or more capable of providing us with the general health care that we need when we need it across the province. So let's see, what else did I want to talk about? Yes, well, we did, of course, already talk about teachers. We're about 1,000 teachers behind where we were back in 2019. In the meantime, the cost to families for that education system is about $115 million more this year. So that's going to be another cost that families have to shoulder, even as we've got all our pressures in our school around COVID, the growing mental health issues, the growing class sizes. We think there's growing enrollment. We don't know. Apparently the government doesn't use enrollment numbers anymore when they do their budgeting, which was a new thing we learned today, which is quite horrifying. And of course we know that they've been making long-term cuts in terms of supporting children with special needs in our classrooms. So altogether, I'm very worried about the quality and the effort, not the effort, we know everyone's working very hard, but the overall quality of education our kids are going to receive. And that's not even taking into account that the only priority these folks seem to have when it comes to education is ramming through an utterly ridiculous curriculum that no one thinks is worth all the money we've spent on it, or that will help our kids in the long term. So what we then have here is a budget that reflects a government that continues to ignore the priorities of Albertans. Albertans want their healthcare system to be there for them when they need it. Jason Kenney is more focused on carving it up and hollowing it out and not putting any more money in to deal with the many, many problems in the healthcare system caused by his mismanagement. We have families that are overwhelmed with inflationary pressures and more costs at the end of each month. Jason Kenney and the UCP promised help was on the way. Turns out there wasn't. And overall, Albertans want to see our economy more diversified, creating longer-term, more stable jobs. And we really saw nothing, like Shannon said, nothing more than a word salad put together to talk about the issue, but not actually to do anything to make it happen. So those are our original thoughts, or first thoughts on that. But we'd sure like to hear what you think, and be happy, of course, to ask any particular questions you have about what was going on in the budget.
Absolutely. So thank you, Rachel. And as she said, we want your questions. So please drop your questions in the chat, in the comments bar, like, share, let other folks know. We want to get as many of you as possible in to help be part of this conversation here tonight. So we have a question here from Mark off the top. So he asks about the gas rebate. So in the bill, so Jason Kenney, he wants to look, of course, like he's helping Albertans out with their utility bills. We know those bills are high. So he is offering a gas rebate. Mark asks, will that gas rebate actually help anyone, or is it more UCP promises and no delivery? Is there anything to this rebate?
Well, I can take a quick run of it, and by all means jump in, because you know a lot about energy and electricity. But no, I was actually dumbfounded by this. I mean, we've seen, this is a government that absolutely has a somewhat distant relationship with the truth, but I literally did not expect to see them crow around for the last 2 weeks, promising relief for families, only to see them introduce a budget that had no relief for families when it comes to utility bills. And so they did that in two ways. First of all, right now, the people of this province are facing unprecedented electricity bills. They open up their bills and they're just not sure how they're going to be able to pay for their electricity and their grocery bill at the end of the month. We've seen bills doubling and tripling, all the stuff. And this so-called natural gas rebate that they said they would bring in doesn't even apply to this year and this winter. It doesn't even start till next winter. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that the criteria to be eligible for it anticipates the net price of natural gas going very, very high, higher than it's ever been this year, and higher than their own projections within the budget suggest it will ever get to. And just in case, to put a bigger, to underline even more definitively the fact that they don't expect to ever pay out a single cent, there's no line item anywhere in the budget for this projected natural gas rebate. So it's a pretend program, an absolute made-up pretend program with no money set aside to actually support Alberta families. And it's just one of those things that anyway, I am always surprised when I continue to be surprised, but this was one of those things that did to me again, yet surprised me.
Quite frankly, you don't need to understand anything about electricity or energy markets or anything else. You just need to be able to tell the difference between a truth and a lie. And the fact of the matter, there is no better truth than the amount of money in your bank account at the end of every month. And there is no help coming for those sky-high utility bills that you got. I too was actually shocked that they just straight bald-faced lied to people and said, there's help coming. There is no such thing coming. If you're looking for help on your utility bills, it's not coming out of this budget. That's just the plain fact of it. So here we are with a budget that, again, I think this is the best indication that it's completely untethered from reality. This is a budget written by a group of people who are worried about their own political future. That's why no one trusts the UCP. And they've written a budget that doesn't reflect ordinary people's priorities, whether it's the cost of living, healthcare, education, or other services.
What an incredibly cynical move. I mean, what an insult to Albertans that are actually struggling with their bills for the UCP to say, sure, we're going to give you help, but it won't start until October, and it won't actually help with anything unless you get prices that we're never going to see. It says a lot, I think, about what this government thinks about people in our province. So we have a question here from Catherine, and Catherine is asking about education. So we know there's been a lot of undercutting on education. We have way less per student in our schools. We had no help during COVID-19. In this budget, we've got royalty surplus. Is there any money to help schools? Catherine says, I have 3 kids in K-7. 2 lost their teachers this year, and 1 teacher just got sick. Is there anything in this budget for education?
Well, there's an ever so slight bump in the K-12 education budget. However, that is mostly dedicated to these collegiate program and charter school growth that they're bringing forward, which is fine. I'm not, charter school, we can have that conversation another time, but the collegiate program, there may be some merit to that. The point is that we still have a K-12 system which is under remarkable pressure on a whole bunch of different fronts. So, there was the loss in learning, just generally, that we know has occurred from kids being online and then back in class and then online and then back in class and all that kind of stuff. So we know that's there. Then on top of it, we know that there are significant mental health issues that have grown in their severity and their frequency amongst our kids. At the same time that we've lost mental health supports within our school system. And then we also know that we are, as I've already said a couple times, slightly less than 1,000 fewer teachers in our classrooms than we had when we were last in government in 2019. And so what do we get in the budget? Well, we don't get the restoration of the PUF funding that was so critically important for tens of thousands of young children with learning challenges and special needs who could literally eliminate those challenges if they get the attention they need in the first 3 years of their education, but who alternatively could find themselves struggling to make up that gap 25 years later. And so that funding is gone, it's not back. And then on the flip side, what we do have though is a plan to do province-wide testing, provincial testing in both grade 1 and grade 2. And we all know that the grade 3 PATs were ridiculous, and all the experts and families and education professionals all understood that the grade 3 PAT was not helpful to educational outcomes for young Alberta, for young kids. And now these guys have brought them back and now propose to do that in grade 1 and 2 with no additional resources. They don't need more testing, they need more teachers, for heaven's sakes. So this does not reflect a plan that was designed to help young people and their kids, young kids with their education and their future. It is a plan designed to shortchange them and probably open up more opportunity for private education.
Excellent. Thanks, Rachel. Well, we've got a comment here from Stephen. Stephen's got a question. He says, hi, Rachel, Shannon, David. Hey, Stephen. How do we reverse everything the UCP has done? And when will that start? Well, I think, Stephen, that work starts right now. It starts immediately. Some of that work is as simple. I think you can join some of the events like this. You can get informed. You can share this information with your friends, your family, your neighbors. The fact is we need to let Albertans know. I think, well, most Albertans know what they're facing in their pocketbook, their costs every day, but they need to know where that's coming from, and that is Jason Kenney and the UCP. And so we're going to be working on that now. We need to reverse some of their decisions, like they're working this budget to privatize our healthcare system. I know I'm going to be talking about that with folks. Shannon, I know you're going to be talking with your folks down in Lethbridge, who 30,000 of whom do not have a family doctor. There is nothing in this budget to help those folks. And of course, we are working towards 2023 and that opportunity then to try to bring a principled government back to the province of Alberta. But speaking of Lethbridge, Shannon, we have Rob, and he was asking did you see any commitments today in this budget specifically for the people of Lethbridge?
No, and generally speaking, a budget document will highlight different commitments for different corners of the province, and this budget was more light than even previous UCP budgets on those regional commitments. It's like they've completely given up on some areas, and nowhere is that more true, I think, than Lethbridge. During the election campaign, well, beforehand, we had committed to replacing the Highway 3 bridge over Old Man River because it's 50 plus years old, and it would be helpful if our major trade corridor didn't fall into the river. And we had that as a commitment. Jason Kenney said, oh yeah, during the campaign, we're going to fund that. It's nowhere to be found. It's completely disappeared. It's just not even returning in terms of an idea or a plan. There's no specific commitment to new schools in Lethbridge. I'll be watching really carefully for that, for any details on that for our community. And most importantly, I think, is the issue that David talked about in terms of the physician shortages. In the region, we're looking at about 45,000 people without a family doctor now. The primary care network says, Lethbridge and some of the many of the surrounding communities. They've done these tiddly little programs for rural health, rural physicians, which is fine, good. I'm sure they need it. The fact of the matter is it's $2 million a year. It's a drop in the bucket. But there's been no indication that even any of that money might be topped up for places where we're having these acute shortages like Lethbridge. Just absolutely nothing. So that's a real problem for the future of the city. And then I'll just note that we have faculty and university staff on strike right now. Our university is a major economic driver. We have thousands of students who can't complete their programs. We have healthcare practicums that are not being completed, so we're not going to have those people working in the healthcare system come fall. We have millions of dollars that have left the city through UCP cuts to the university, but also now all of the economic activity around the university. It's devastating for people right now. And all of this could be avoided by just taking a stable, very boring, predictable approach to funding post-secondary education every year at 2% increases.
Yeah, makes sense.
Well, thank you, Shannon. And indeed, I think there's a lot of parts of Alberta today that are feeling left out of this budget. We have a comment here from Lucy. Lucy actually has a question. She says, they're putting more money into mental health for students. What will that actually look like? Rachel, you were talking about this.
Well, there was actually a mention, I vaguely recall this as I was scanning through the hundreds of pages of budget documents, of a small increase in mental health funding. But one of the things that we have learned with this government is they will take out hundreds of millions of dollars and then reinvest $5 and then throw themselves a party. And they do this, they've been doing this for the last 2.5 years on post-secondary, which of course Shannon was just talking about. And when it comes to services for our kids in the school, this is another example of that. So, for instance, we've seen a lot of teachers lost through that. We've seen a lot of people that served as counselors lost in our schools. We actually called on the government to put a mental health counselor into each school. And unfortunately, we don't see that. On the flip side, what we have seen is a loss in funding for PUF, which was a profoundly important program worth far more than they're talking about putting in now with respect to mental health, and that's not there either. Generally speaking, with mental health, we proposed at the beginning of COVID that we start doing more funding of mental health counseling, ensured that everybody with or without insurance could get free psychological counseling up to a certain point, and that was going to cost about $100 million. Well, we don't see anything like that in this budget. So unfortunately, what we've seen is them systematically take supports for special needs kids, counseling supports, speech supports, and mental health supports out of the system holus bolus, and now talk about putting a little bit of it back in. But they're not actually fixing the significant problems that they created.
Indeed. Well, we have a question here from Reg. Reg is talking about healthcare in today's budget. He says, they never mentioned the private healthcare plans that opened the door to the disastrous American system only for the rich. So, Reg, absolutely, we are very concerned with what we are seeing happening with our public healthcare system under Jason Kenney and UCP. I've said it often, I will say it again, I don't think there's been any government in the history of this province that has done more damage to our public healthcare system than Jason Kenney and the UCP. He signed his big placard before he was elected, saying that he would fund and protect public healthcare in the province of Alberta. He set out to undermine it from day one. He set up their McKinnon report, their Ernst & Young review of AHS, and then we hit COVID-19. And Jason Kenney went right ahead with his plans. He kept fighting with doctors. He acted last and least repeatedly through wave after wave of COVID-19 while he was targeting the wages of nurses, even while they were fighting on the front lines. They ran our healthcare system into the ground to its absolute limits, drove up incredible costs, and it put us in an incredible hole with over 20,000 canceled surgeries. And Jason Kenney's solution for all of this is to try to force more private profit into our public healthcare system, to take more public health dollars and use them to pay shareholder dividends, to go into the pockets of corporations, when they could be being invested in our public system to deliver for Albertans. And even on Jason Kenney's vaunted plan that he's talking about now to reduce surgical wait lists in the province of Alberta, he's basing that off a plan in Saskatchewan that utterly failed. They temporarily lowered wait lists in Saskatchewan, but we're now at, I think 3 times longer than they were in 2015. We have some of the worst records for hip replacements, knee replacements for the amount of time in Canada. They are doing worse than we are here in Alberta, and that's the system Jason Kenney wants to bring in. And even if that was a successful system, we can't tell where in the budget the money actually is. Officials today couldn't tell us where any of the dollars were actually going. Jason Kenney won't say what the dollars are going to be used for and where they're going to go. So we are very concerned. We're going to be asking a lot of questions, I think, through the budgets and estimates process, because Albertans deserve to have the healthcare system there when they need it. And after Jason Kenney has damaged it so badly, we got to make sure every dollar that's going in is going in to repair that damage and provide care for Albertans. Terry commented on healthcare and he said, well, I still don't have a doctor. Jason Kenney chased her away. I'm getting so many emails from so many Albertans who are feeling exactly that way, who are still struggling. James was asking, maybe Rachel, you want to take this one. He's asking, why do you think Edmonton was not fairly represented in today's budget? So we certainly heard from Mayor Sohi today about his deep disappointment, and he called it a slap in the face. What are your thoughts on what's happened for Edmonton in this budget?
Well, I mean, I think you'd have to ask Jason Kenney why it is that he has so little concern for the interests of Edmontonians. But it is absolutely true that we saw, some bad news for Edmonton on a few fronts. First of all, we saw the funding for the South Edmonton Hospital pushed out another several years. So no real work started yet. We've got a big empty lot in South Edmonton with no construction, nothing. So that's a problem. And the point has been made that we're very happy that Red Deer is getting their hospital. We have been pushing for that too, but Edmonton has multiplied in size many times the whole city. We've added 3 or 4 cities of Red Deer to Edmonton, and we haven't had a new hospital over that time. And so Jason Kenney's decision to just push it out indefinitely is a slap in the face. The other thing that I also, I do agree with Mayor Sohi. He was pushing, as was his predecessors, for support for affordable housing and for action to end homelessness. And we saw no step down from their previously rolled out plan to significantly reduce investment in affordable housing that we first heard about in previous budgets. They had a chance this time to again step up for families who are struggling with their costs on so many levels and to start investing in more affordable housing. They did not take that chance. And on top of it, we know that the money that they put in the budget this year to combat homelessness is actually less than what they what they spent last year. And that was another big ask from Edmonton. So, and all that on top of it is, of course, that the municipal budget, the budget for municipalities generally, we finally saw the bottom drop out of municipal funding, and we saw municipalities across the province lose about $1 billion. And of course, that'll be spread out amongst all municipalities, but you can imagine that Edmonton will unfortunately bear a significant portion of that major cut. So all in all, not a good day for Edmonton, not a good day for Calgary either. In both cases, there was sort of a random nod to downtown revitalization strategies, $5 million in each city. And when we asked officials, so what are they planning to spend that $5 million on? Because that's, to be clear, nothing close to what is required to address those crises. They had no idea. We'll figure it out when we go along. And it'll be, I'm sure, a lovely press conference that they will buy themselves for $5 million per city.
If I may say, as the representative for Edmonton's downtown, that is quite, as Mayor Sohi said, a slap in the face. We are dealing with a major crisis in the heart of our city, our core communities here, with individuals who, Albertans, our friends and neighbors in our community here who are living houseless, who are struggling with mental health, who are struggling with substance use. The city asks for less than they spend on the Energy War Room every year to offer wraparound services at the supportive housing that is the solution to this problem. That is hurting these individuals, that is hurting businesses like this, that is making it difficult for our communities. We have record levels of overdoses in our public spaces on our streets. Jason Kenney and the UCP, they're cutting harm reduction supports and other things and refusing to step up to the table. So I know a lot of folks in my community are going to be incredibly frustrated by that lack of support for Edmonton. Alicia is asking, were there any commitments for new high schools in the capital region? Did we see anything for schools?
We don't know yet is the short answer, but unlikely that if people are looking for a new school in their community that they're going to get one. On about average, we're building or modernizing about 60 schools a year, but these guys are building, modernizing, or planning funds 15 total. total this year, and that's what they've been doing for the last couple of years and what they've been planning for. That's not a lot of schools for a province of 4.5 million, where you have still the youngest population in Canada. People are there's a lot of young kids, and more to the point, even on the high schools piece, you know, we built and modernized a lot of elementary and middle schools. Well, those kids had this bad habit of getting older, and now they need to go to a high school, and those are more expensive capital spend. There's no question about that. High schools are bigger; they're more sophisticated buildings. But the fact is that it's a very small priority for these folks. I think it's really important that we understand the role that schools play in community building, community revitalization, home prices, all of these decisions that municipalities make around new neighborhoods, old neighborhoods. Schools is pretty well the anchor point for residential neighborhoods. And the fact that these guys can't seem to get it together to work with municipalities to understand that parents and children are people who exist, and they're going to continue to exist here, and they need to go to school. I think it speaks to the lack of future planning. And a budget is boring. It's just a bunch of numbers on a page, but what those numbers bring to life is our values and what we understand our responsibility to each other, and it's been abrogated in this instance. But that 15 list, it'll come out over the course of the year, and we'll be watching for it and talking to communities about it.
And that just seems to be the case with so much of this budget. There is no detail here. There's no there. There's so little information. I guess there's a reason Jason Kenney and the UCP have been voted the least transparent government in Canada. This budget bears that out. Just want to remind you folks, share this conversation on Facebook, on YouTube. Let your friends, family know. We're going to keep going for a bit. We'd love to have more questions. We want to get this message out to as many folks in the province as we can. I think we got about another 20 minutes, so plenty of time for people to tune in. We got a question here from Michael. Now, Michael is asking if there's any kind of environmental initiatives or climate change strategy indicated in this budget, other than suing Ottawa over the carbon tax. So we have record resource royalties. Certainly our resource companies, the resource extraction business, is seeing record profits. Do we see anything from the government indicating that they intend to use that to address environmental concerns?
No.
All right, next question.
No, to your point, Michael, I mean, there's no more legal fees for suing Ottawa over the carbon tax in the budget this year because they lost. So they're done with that. There is an opportunity here for sure with all of this new production to make sure that the price on pollution that is being paid by the large emitters, the big companies, at the source, is going towards reducing our emissions and investing in new technology and making sure that we are an energy province in every sense of that word. None of that is happening. What they're doing, in fact, is rating that price on pollution that the big companies pay in a way that we never did, and even the PCs before us never did, and putting it towards their deficit reduction because they are using it to paper over their billions of dollars in corporate tax giveaways. And that's the unfortunate truth. It means that we can take less action on reducing our emissions.
And it's really, they were dining out, I noticed I think it was in the throne speech, or maybe it was in the strategic document, I can't remember which bit of verbiage it was that I was reading, that, about how they're, going to support the oil sands companies in their goal to reach net zero emissions by 2050. Well, that's lovely, but I think that the government could actually play a bigger role and also be a bit more ambitious. And so we had talked about getting our electricity grid to net zero by 2035, and we have heard from economists from very business friendly sources who have said that the decision to seek that net zero outcome by 2035 could increase the number of jobs and investment in the renewable sector, in the clean tech sector significantly. I can't remember the numbers. I know there was about an extra 60,000 jobs that would come to it, and a lot more money. I can't remember the figure off the top of my head right now. But the key is in not setting that goal and not starting to do the work to reach that outcome, we're not sending a message to investors that this is a thing to invest in. And so that huge jump that we experienced when we were in government in terms of leading the continent in renewable energy investment under, in part from the initiatives that you brought in, Shannon, has been lost. And the tech that comes along with it and the bump that we should be able to see in Alberta has also been lost. They like to brag over the fact that tech is growing faster than it ever has before in Alberta, and that is true, but it is growing slower than it is growing in any other province in the country. So the fact is, tech's growing everywhere. It's not growing anywhere near as fast here as it is in other places. But anyway, and that ties back to having a bold vision for net zero on our electricity grid. And this government's bold vision relates to mining coal in our Rocky Mountains. And that's bold in a whole different way of using the word bold. But anyway, so yeah, disappointing. Really no talk about the need to be a responsible player in the world when it comes to doing our part to reduce emissions.
A real lack of leadership from the government. So Shannon, I got one here for you. This is for your policy nerd side, as it were. Indeed, yeah. Tana is asking a question that I know some of our policy folks in caucus have also been somewhat furious about. What happened to the Auditor General reports? So, of course, you are the chair of the Public Accounts Committee where these reports come to get discussed. Are Albertans ever going to get to see those reports and be able to see how badly the UCP is managing our public funds?
Oh yes, we will see them. But the point here is that the Auditor General came to Public Accounts and made a very, usual and boring request to come and visit Public Accounts after he had done these special COVID audits. He had done 9 or 10 of them, and he said, "Okay, I would like to come in June. That's good timing for us." Under normal circumstances, this is just a rubber stamp. There's no drama to this. The Public Accounts Committee says, yes, very good, we shall have a meeting, off we go. No headlines required. The UCP, it was absolutely
every day when you think you're not going to get surprised, they just surprise you. Yep.
They just said, no, we don't want the Auditor General to come to Public Accounts and answer questions about these special audits that he did on all of the extra funds that were spent by COVID, or during COVID. And I was speechless at the time. I could barely this is the Auditor General of Alberta that came to us to request, and the government just said, no, actually, we'd rather not. So yes, you'll get to read them. Yes, there will be a meeting with the Auditor General in like December of next year. But the whole point of the AG coming to us was that he would like to have this conversation in the full light of day now. And you won't get that opportunity because apparently the UCP has something to hide.
Indeed. I mean, it seems part and parcel. I think we've seen a lot of disrespect from this government towards, I think, the incredible public servants who do such amazing work on our behalf and maintain these systems to hold governments accountable. But it seems Jason Kenney and the UCP have no interest in transparency or accountability and just undermine these systems at every turn. We've got a lot of comments here from parents tonight. Understandably, I think, with families facing a lot of costs, but also very worried about children's education. So, for example, we have Cynthia here. She asks, is there a plan to extend the funding to help students, especially in early grades, who fell behind in reading and math basics? Rachel, you talked about this a little bit, that learning loss. Is there anything in this budget to address those effects from COVID?
Well, they did talk about a very small amount of money that was dedicated, I can't remember what it was, $30–40 million. I don't think it was in this budget though, and it was $40 million dedicated to helping kids catch up. But to be clear, that's spread out across the whole education system, and so it's going to have a minimal impact given and the way they're planning to roll it out. It won't provide the kind of support that's necessary. And also what they're doing is they are now going to have these tests where they just test, they spend God knows how much money testing and stressing out our kids in grade 1 and grade 2 to find out what they know in math and reading. And there's no extra money for them to then do something about it. So it's really, it's just not, it's not a plan. And it's not going to be, it's be successful. I mean, let's be honest, we know the past 2 years has been so tough on kids. And so we need people who are properly trained to be in our schools to help our kids adjust to what they've been through, to give them the supports they need to develop the kind of resilience they need going forward. And we also need to acknowledge that you're not going to make up for learning loss by having roughly 1,000 fewer teachers in our classrooms when our class sizes are growing and when our kids are under a higher level of stress and their actual capacity to learn has been interfered with by this constant online, offline thing. So basically what's happening is the UCP, if you look at the budget, they're basically saying is, yeah, we know it's been really tough on kids. Sure hope they figure it out. And for me, and I think for so many people that I talk to, it doesn't matter if you're left, right, NDP, UCP, whatever, everybody, most people believe and understand that our future is very much driven by the quality of education that our kids can receive. And this failure to see the importance of that is really distressing, and it's very, very short-term thinking.
So Deborah's asking about the school system too, and sort of following on some of this, and the comments earlier about the small amount of funding that the UCP is talking about putting in for mental health. Deborah asked, she says, teachers aren't trained in mental health support. Wouldn't this education funding be better spent with organizations who do this as their specialty? Shannon, you've got 2 boys in school. What are your thoughts?
Well, the short answer is yes, and that's why we called to have a mental health counselor in every school. We need people who are properly trained in mental health support to do this work. And I think it's telling that every time it comes time to remove a mask mandate or that kind of thing, they talk about mental health, but when the rubber actually meets the road and it's time to actually support kids in schools, there's nothing for that. Again, the sort of performance art of putting politics above everything, including the well-being of children, is that's something you see in the numbers on the page. But I want Rachel to tell the story of the extraordinary exchange that you had today with the officials on the enrollment numbers. So typically when you make a budget, you have some idea of how many children you're making a budget for, because you need to have teachers, and that's what the education system is.
Yeah.
But so when we asked for those enrollment numbers, what happened?
Well, it was shocking, because we know this. We've always, when we were in government, we always said, okay, so what is the expected number of kids that will be coming into our schools this year? X number will come in, Y number will go out. What's the net outcome? More kids, fewer kids, blah, blah, blah. And we used to do this on a regular basis because that's how you budget, not only for the year ahead, but for the decade ahead, all the things. And we used to regularly share with Albertans what the enrollment numbers were. So interestingly, last year, they tried to not give us the enrollment numbers, and we kind of had a bit of a thing with them, and eventually we did get the enrollment numbers, and in fact they revealed that the per student funding was going down. So this year we asked, and I had this weird exchange where, well, we don't know yet, we don't have those numbers yet. And so I said, well, how did you come up with the number that you would spend on education if you didn't have the enrollment numbers? Are you spending more per child, less per child? Like, how did you come up with a number? We don't have the numbers yet. We just decided we would spend the same as last year. And I said, but so you're literally telling me that you decided on the amount of money to put into the second largest category of government spending in the whole government of Alberta on the basis of we're going to do the same as last year, without thinking about what the people who receive that service might need and how many of the people who receive that service there might be. Apparently the number of kids is no longer a feature in budgeting for our K-12 public education. And wow, just wow. It was pretty weird conversation, and I'm shortening that. It doesn't sound like it because I rarely shorten, but like Shannon can say, like, I did kind of go back on it 3 or 4 times, and we just could not get an answer.
Great.
Yeah.
It was a lawyer moment.
Yeah.
And that's just stunning, because basically you only have 2 choices there. We're either talking about utter incompetence in government planning or deliberate dishonesty. And either way, that just spells real trouble, I think, for our kids in our schools and Alberta families next year. So I understand we have time for about 3 more questions. So again, please like, share, let other folks know. We're going to be here for a little bit longer. We'll get through 3 more questions, so let's get to them. Angie on YouTube has a question. Angie is asking, she says there's nothing in this budget for post-secondary students. She said, food bank use is up. Education quality is failing. Of course, all of these students have been doing a lot of online learning over the last few years, and their institutions have gotten no support from government for that. Research opportunities are gone, and the UCP is interfering in bargaining and extending strikes. We can't wait. So what now?
Well, let me just jump in here for the beginning, because I have to say, this one has, anyway, we all have our little things that bug us, but one of the things that has gotten me to sort of go off on a little rant every now and then when I'm using my inside voice is this thing that the UCP does, where they've essentially cut $690 million out of our post-secondary education, and then the minister, prances around having little press conferences where he holds himself a party for a $1.5 million grant. After a $690 million cut. And it's remarkable how many times he actually gets headlines for those little micro parties that he holds for himself. So today, he kind of played that game again. He actually went out and he said, there's more money in post-secondary education than there has ever been before. And that's true. And the reason for that is because post-secondaries are running their own businesses and charging more tuition than ever before. So when you look at how much post-secondary money is coming from sources other than the government of Alberta, and you add that to the paltry amount that the government of Alberta puts in, yes, there is more money in post-secondary than ever before. But that is because they are selling things to people. They are turning into for-profit businesses in order to keep themselves afloat. And of course, most importantly, they are charging students hundreds of millions of dollars more in tuition, thereby reducing access for many, many people. So let there be no mistake. The government of Alberta is giving significantly less, investing significantly less in our post-secondary education than they ever have before. And the disingenuous presentation of that issue by the current minister cannot be allowed to stand. And the thing that is so frustrating for this is that, again, this is not a left-wing issue or a right-wing issue, or it shouldn't be. We do desperately need to diversify our economy. We do need to find ways to make our economy more resilient and have it consist of jobs that are more predictable, stable, mortgage-paying, the kinds of jobs that people can rely on outside of a drilling season or regardless of the day-to-day changes in commodity prices. And we need to be able to do that. And post-secondary is a fundamental component of that work. And this government has been attacking post-secondary since day one. And if they are hostile to post-secondary education, fine. I think that's unwise, but be upfront with it and tell Albertans that's what they think. Don't try to pretend you're doing something that you're not.
Absolutely. And I hear you, Angie. When you're talking about the costs for students, of course, I have 3 post-secondary institutions here in Edmonton City Centre: Northwest College, MacEwan University, and NAIT. And so thousands of students that attend those institutions living here in the constituency, and I've been hearing from them about this increase in cost. Over the course of the next year, students are going to be paying over $150 million in tuition fees. So you're absolutely right. Food bank usage is up. Student loans are up. These students are struggling, and it hurts them, and it hurts our local economy. I've got a lot of staff and people that work at post-secondary institutions that live here too. They all contribute they support businesses like this here in our communities, and because of Jason Kenney and the UCP, they all have less in their pocket to be able to do that. Hey, to be able to live on, and indeed now, like in Lethbridge, they're being forced onto the strike lines. So incredible damage that's being done by this government. Candace is asking, and here, we'll throw this one to you, Shannon. Are there things in this budget that are good? Again, most of it is garbage, a lot of privatization, but is there anything worth celebrating?
Well, I mean, they're continuing a lot of the capital investments that they began, so that's a positive. The Calgary Cancer Centre will be completed. There's no operating funding for the Calgary Cancer Centre, but at least they didn't delay that that project that we began and budgeted for. At least it didn't get drawn out because it had been about 20 years in the making of actually being required in the first place when we made the decision to fund it. And of course, there's another piece that actually isn't bad, which is the new technology spaces, the 7,000 tech spaces. And the reason why I think it's not bad is because it is something that we did. Yeah, it's awfully familiar. It's a bit of Groundhog Day. And so it was an initiative that we began. And think of how much further ahead we'd be in terms of skill shortages, skills mismatch, and just like diversification, people out there with the training, starting their own businesses and so on. If they hadn't canceled it, they've gone back to that initiative. That's a good thing. I'm willing to give props where it's deserved. I'm concerned that doing that within static post-secondary budgets, I'm not exactly sure where they're going to create these spaces. Like, are people going to be sitting in lawn chairs out on the lawn? Like, where are the spaces if you don't have the operating funding to support them? But they're doing that. Good. We shall see how it all rolls out, and I hope it works because I want the best for this province.
Absolutely. So we got a couple more folks, and then we'll be closing out for the night. But one of our colleagues has dropped in tonight. Heather Sweet, she's our critic for rural economic development and agriculture, and has been doing some great work on that file. And I know she's been thinking about this a lot. And Shannon, she was wondering if you wanted to touch on a situation that we've seen recently and the lack of support in this budget for rural economic growth, the southern Alberta economy, which we know unfortunately bore a lot of the economic brunt of the impacts of the illegal Coots blockade.
Yeah, it was about $1 billion in impact on Alberta's GDP. The majority of it felt in the southern Alberta region among agriculture producers, manufacturers, and others. It was an extraordinary economic cost, and the reason for that cost was Jason Kenney's dithering, and that blockade should have been moved out on day one or day two. So we have a situation where a lot of folks are now behind, and we had an enormous economic cost there. This budget could have maybe met some of those short-term challenges, but also plotted a path for the future for value-added processing and support to agricultural producing communities in southern Alberta. We didn't see that. We did see some cuts that we'll dig into a little further in the next couple of weeks as we get more familiar with the budget papers around cuts to capital grants for agricultural societies. That's pretty big in a lot of small towns and the small communities. Cuts to rural programming. And one thing I think that we're going to need to look into is some of that agricultural research at funding and support. That's really, really key for a lot of producers. The UCP's been monkeying around with it for the last couple of budgets, and it's something that we're going to keep a close eye on.
Nice. Well, we have one last question. And this one is going to go over to you, Rachel. It's a big one. I think it's a good one. From Malcolm, he says, Rachel, I support you and I will keep doing so. Tell us what you would have done differently so I can imagine what 2023 is going to look like.
Well, thanks for that question, Malcolm. That's a great question. And listen, what we would have done is we would have built a budget and a plan that was designed to really respond to what we are hearing are the real needs and the aspirations of Albertans. In the short and most immediate term, we would have tried to find a way to deal with the incredible pressures on your monthly budgets caused by spiraling inflation, whether it be the insurance costs that have taken off because they took off the cap we had in place. Whether it be the utility costs, and the electricity, which have gone up almost threefold because of the loss of the cap that we had in place. Whether it be tuition costs, we've been talking about that. Whether it be the extra that you're paying now in personal income tax, whether it be an increase in school fees. All these things make a difference in the lives of regular people. And so we don't think it's fair that you should be constantly having to pay more so that Jason Kenney can continue to give away billions of dollars to profitable corporations. So that's the first thing. The second thing that we would have done, of course, is we would have looked at, our healthcare system, but also our healthcare providers, those people who go into work each and every day, who have been there for us for the last 2 years, who are exhausted, who work within a system that is stretched to the nth degree, and who are now looking down the barrel of a massive surgery wait list and an increasingly actually unhealthy population to some degree because of deferred care. And we would have said, listen, our healthcare system needs support, and we need to invest in that public healthcare system because we know when it's delivered publicly, that's the best way to get the most for the money that we invest in a way that is most sustainable and going to last the longest time. The same goes for education, because we all care about our kids, and we care about our neighbors' kids too. If you don't happen to have kids, you want the next generation to be well educated and to have the tools at their disposal to grow the economy. And these are things that you would have seen us working on in the budget. And finally, instead of just tossing the word salad to say jobs and diversification, we would have actually continued with some of the well-researched, thoughtful strategies that we had in place, along with more that we would have learned from job creators throughout our province, on how to kickstart and give that little bit of extra support to emerging sectors within our economy in order to grow and diversify it and create those important jobs that we all want to see. That's our vision for the future, along with listening to what folks like you have to say. And if you have ideas that we haven't had a chance to spend and talk about tonight, because we were kind of driven by key elements of the budget, do head as well to albertasfuture.ca, because we do definitely want to keep working on that economic plan and that future going ahead. The one thing that I forgot to talk about was childcare. Can I just talk about child? You know me, it's not very well organized. I was all getting ready to wrap up, but I do just have to drop this in there. Folks in Alberta thought that they could breathe a sigh of relief when the UCP finally appeared to put their political interests in their back pocket and sign up to the affordable childcare plan that was coming from Ottawa, the one that was geared towards getting us down to $10 a day childcare, affordable, high quality, accessible. Well, what we learned today in the budget is that going all the way out to 24-25, the provincial government has not budgeted to put a single cent of matching dollars into that plan. So this is very worrisome to me. I think this suggests to me that they think that they can wait out, they're hoping to wait out the federal government and hoping that a Pierre Poilievre prime ministership will slash and burn childcare. I don't know. But what it really means for Albertans is that we're not going to get that $10 a day childcare till the very last possible minute. Yeah. And that is bad for Alberta families and affordability. It is also bad for our economic future, because I got to tell you, the way we're going to get through the challenges we are facing, and make no mistake, just because the price of oil is up today does not mean that we don't have long-term structural economic challenges we need to address. The way we're going to get through it is not by relying on what's under the ground, but by celebrating and attracting more of what's walking on top of it. And that means continuing to bring young people, young families to Alberta. If other provinces are matching and providing $10 a day childcare, but our province is stubbornly refusing to do it, for instance, like in places in Calgary, where they did not see a 50% cut in childcare costs, where their childcare costs will continue to be exceptionally high, then we're not going to get those people to move to our province. And we're going to pay the price for generations to come. So that was the last thing in the budget that I was shocked to see, that they really were not planning on ever putting any money in to match the federal dollars, which means Alberta families are going to pay the price. And so will our economy, and so will women, which means everyone will. And that's not good. Okay, now I'm done.
There you have it, folks. I mean, time and time again, when this government has the option of doing something to help Albertans or something to help themselves, they're making the wrong choice every single time. That's the story of this budget. So we're going to be talking about this a lot more in the weeks to come. We're going to be bringing this to question period. We're going to be asking questions of every single minister to track why this government is refusing to make the investments to actually support Alberta families. So thank you to all of you for tuning in tonight for this discussion. It's a discussion that's going to continue. I hope you'll continue to keep in touch, because if we want to make a difference in this province, we need more Albertans engaged. We need to get these stories out to your friends, your neighbors, so that we can make a change to get you the principled government you deserve in 2023. So thanks to all of you for tuning in tonight. A big thank you to Julie and Madison. Friend Julie, come up. Just come say hi quickly. Folks, this is Julie, the owner here of Majesty and Friends. Yeah. Thank you, Julie.
Oh, you come over here.
Okay, just over here. So a wonderful business that has some amazing goods for sale, including these beautiful, stylish, and hopefully very prescient mugs that we have here in a variety of colorful phrases and styles. I'm very proud to have you here in my constituency of Edmonton City Centre. Thank you, Julie.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.
Wonderful. So come by, folks. Check them out here at Manchester Square. If your question didn't get in tonight, if we didn't have a chance to get to it, didn't get a chance to send it, please feel free to send it through Rachel's Facebook inbox. She'll respond in the days ahead. We're going to be holding another one of these next week. So tune in, Facebook, subscribe to the YouTube channel for more details on that. Thanks, Shannon. Thanks, Rachel. Have a great night, folks.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Tens of thousands of Albertans have already provided their idea for how we can build Alberta's future. You can too by going to albertasfuture.ca.